Super Mario RPG might have lost its legendary 7-star subtitle in the remake for the Switch, but thankfully it didn't lose its charming personality as it remains one of the most endearing Mario adventures ever made. From its thrilling opening moments in Bowser's Keep to its dramatic finale in the game's final area, Mario's first RPG is consistently entertaining from beginning to end as it tells a unique story filled with interesting and memorable characters. While the game is not as cleanly divided into sections as the Paper Mario games it inspired, Super Mario RPG has 7 chapters that take Mario and crew through a variety of new locations as he attempts to repair the broken Star Road that the Smithy Gang destroyed. In this video, I'll be ranking each of these chapters from worst to best as I take a look at their positive and negative qualities to see what makes each of them stand out. This video will primarily focus on the Switch remake instead of the original on the Super Nintendo, so keep that in mind as I use the updated names for items, moves, and locations, or discuss topics like combat. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and welcome to every Super Mario RPG chapter ranked. Although I enjoy aspects about every chapter in Super Mario RPG, the bottom spot was a pretty easy selection for me as I've always found Moleville and the Mole Mountains to be pretty forgettable. While I appreciate Super Mario RPG's lightning-fast pacing and generally think it's a refreshing mix-up from what you'd normally see in an RPG, Moleville is the one chapter in the game that does not benefit from a short runtime. With just Moleville and the Mole Mines to explore, you won't be staying in this region for very long, and without other locations to flesh out the chapter, it feels like it's over as soon as it begins. And even if you choose to include the activities on Yoster Isle, Super Mario RPG's third chapter still fails to stand out compared to others in the game. The general premise of the chapter is simple. 2 mole siblings, Dinah and Mite, are trapped inside the Moleville mines, and it's up to Mario to rescue the moles as well as their dad who has been searching for them. It's a cute story, but nothing spectacular really happens here. Bumping your head on the ceiling and getting robbed by Croco again is fine, but nothing all that special. The boss of the area, Punchinello, is one of the least notable in the entire game, which is particularly disappointing considering how important boss battles are to Super Mario RPG. And the giant bomb explosion that the mole mines built up to feels underwhelming, and it's probably supposed to be funny, but I didn't really find it all that amusing. On top of that, Moleville has some of the weakest music in Super Mario RPG's incredible OST. While I wouldn't call the music bad, neither the town's main track nor the minecart minigames track are all that catchy and are overshadowed by so many other great songs in the game. That said, I do enjoy the minecart minigame and feel it's one of the highlights of this section of Super Mario RPG. It's always a blast making quick decisions to try and get a high score, and I wish Moleville had more things to do that were as entertaining as this minigame is. Aside from acquiring the shiny stone that's needed in order to fight against Culex in Monstro Town, there really isn't much else going on in Moleville. You can hear the moles in the mines sing the Moleville Blues, and you can even change the credits sequence slightly depending on how many fireworks you purchase, but these are insignificant optional tasks that don't truly elevate Moleville in a meaningful way. Unfortunately, this chapter has a lot going against it, from its short run time to the fact that it's sandwiched between 2 of Super Mario RPG's better chapters, and it can't really compete with the rest of the content in the game. It's why I feel it deserves the bottom spot on this ranking, even though it's not a section that drags or really detracts from the enjoyment of the game in any way. Nearly every Mario RPG starts with some kind of twist, whether it's Peach getting her voice stolen by Cackletta in Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, or the forced wedding of Bowser and Peach in Super Paper Mario, but for my money the most memorable twist in a Mario RPG belongs to Super Mario RPG. The entire first trip to Bowser's Keep is unforgettable, and I always thought dueling atop falling chandeliers was badass, but no moment is better or more iconic than when the Smithy Gang finally arrives on the scene. Watching a massive sword the size of Bowser's Keep destroy the Star Road as it descends from the sky is intimidating, and its appearance is immediately impactful as Mario, Bowser, and Peach are all thrown from the castle as these new villains take over. Witnessing this massive weapon destroy the path to Bowser's Keep and declare the intentions of the Smithy Gang only serves to put an exclamation point on the prologue and set the stakes for Mario's new adventure. From there, the intensity is pulled back a bit, but the fast-paced nature of Super Mario RPG continues as it won't take more than an hour before we will have defeated our first bosses and claimed one of the once titular legendary 7 stars. For me, this is a big part of why I enjoy the first chapter of Super Mario RPG as much as I do, because I appreciate how it doesn't take forever to get going, and it doesn't overstay its welcome either. The pacing in this game is easily one of its greatest strengths because the gameplay is always changing and you're constantly moving to new locations as well. In just the first 90 minutes, you'll have visited multiple areas, acquired Mallow as a new partner, encountered a variety of new and familiar enemies, learned about various gameplay mechanics, and saved the Mushroom Kingdom from a hostile takeover. With so much to do, it's easy to get hooked and stay engaged throughout the entire chapter, but even had there not been quite as much to do, Super Mario RPG's first major area would still stand out because of how charming it is. As fun as combat can be, the real appeal of a game like this for me is in its characters, dialogue, and story, of which Super Mario RPG has some of the best in a Nintendo game. I still remember watching Mario act out what had happened to him at Bowser's Keep to Toad for the first time and thinking how funny it was. It's so much more endearing than if Mario were to just talk, and you'll find the game is packed to the brim with stuff like this. In Chapter 1, we just so happen to be lucky enough to see him act twice for us, but the charm comes from other sources as well, like this cute Toad that thinks she's slick by tricking us into jumping for her. Ultimately, Chapter 1 is probably too short and easy to justify ranking any higher than it is, but it is by no means a bad section of the game. It doesn't drag for even a second, and does a tremendous job at establishing what Super Mario RPG is all about, which makes it easy to get quickly invested into the story. In fact, I can't imagine this game having a different nor a better opening than it has, and I really don't have many complaints for it at all. The remake only enhances the already phenomenal music and unique art style that Super Mario RPG is known for, and if I had to choose the best first chapter in an RPG game, Bowser's Keep and the Mushroom Kingdom would undoubtedly be on the short list of top contenders. One of my favorite parts about replaying Super Mario RPG is getting to see all the interesting and unique bosses that the game has to offer. Along with its charming dialogue and fantastic music, I'd say the boss battles are what really define the adventure, and the game is unsurprisingly packed full of memorable ones. That's why from the sunken ship to Seaside Town, the entire Seaside area stands out to me because there isn't a bad boss battle to be had in Chapter 5. King Calamari, Jonathan Jones, and Spiridovich are all among my favorite fights in the game and help elevate the Seaside area over a few of the others in Super Mario RPG. What stands out to me about these battles is how they feel a lot more serious than previous boss fights in the game. Even though we literally fought a guy holding two knives named Knife Guy in the previous chapter, there was still a goofiness that kept the whole ordeal feeling lighthearted and fun. However, the tone feels a bit more ominous in the sunken ship, and it adds an element of intimidation to the battles, specifically the Jonathan Jones fight thanks to all the build-up for it, that makes them feel like a bigger deal. That said, these battles are still somewhat easy and don't come close to the level of seriousness that you'll find in other Square RPGs, but I appreciate how these fights help shift the game into a slightly more serious gear before its final two chapters. Overall, the storytelling is strong in the Seaside region, and its arc is among my favorites in the game. Finally meeting Jonathan Jones is an awesome moment that feels important, and I really love how you were able to earn his respect through combat. Seeing him help in the fight against Spiridovich later on was a nice choice that I remember not really fully appreciating until the credits rolled, where I realized just how much that scene endeared me to the pirate shark. It was a true feel-good moment that only added layers to Chapter 5's satisfying conclusion, as we not only saved the denizens of Seaside Town with Jonathan Jones' help, but we acquired the 5th legendary star as well. He's a great character that really won me over with the cool 1v1 section in his boss fight, and is a big part of why I love this arc so much. Outside of Jonathan Jones and the boss fights, Chapter 5 is also notable to me for having one of my favorite themes in Super Mario RPG in the Seaside Town theme. It's very catchy and relaxing, and I love its carefree vibes that fit perfectly for a resort town. Seaside Town is also the area with the most shops in the game, making it a great place to stock up on items and equipment. Of these shops, I'm particularly fond of the Frog Sage's student in the Elder's house, not for what he can sell you, though he has good items you can buy, but for how funny I think it is that in just 3 chapters he went from a tadpole to an adult having an existential crisis looking for meaning in the world. That's the type of ridiculous stuff I love to see in Mario RPGs. Honestly, there isn't much for me to criticize in Chapter 5, because it's remarkably solid throughout. I suppose the one issue might be the fact that the puzzle in the sunken ship has 2 answers that fit all the clues given to you, yet only one answer works. I could see how that might be frustrating to deal with, however, I think it's a minor issue that doesn't really detract from an otherwise fine puzzle. And even if it did ruin the puzzle for me, that's not enough to stop me from loving the aesthetics of the Spiritavich fight, or the silliness of the fake toads checking in with each other to make sure they have their story straight for Mario, or any of the other positive qualities that make Chapter 5 such a joy to play. The final chapter in Super Mario RPG that sees Mario finally return to Bowser's Keep to confront the Smithy Gang is in contention as the game's best chapter because it manages to satisfyingly pay off all of the hype that had been built up throughout the adventure. It is a cathartic chapter that heavily focuses on combat and throws at you some of the most difficult and important battles in the entire game. It is a gauntlet that amps up the challenge compared to previous sections in Super Mario RPG, which adds to the climactic atmosphere by building tension as you march towards the final boss. Everything has been leading up to the moment where you confront Smithy himself and take back the last of the legendary 7 stars, and the entire ending sequence from re-entering Bowser's Keep on doesn't disappoint. Personally, nothing beats the fight against Exor atop Bowser's Keep for me because, let's be honest, he is the most intimidating boss in Super Mario RPG. It always felt like the most important fight in the game because Exor is by far the most recognizable member of the Smithy Gang, and also because a massive sword the size of a castle is nothing to scoff at either. I'm sure I'm not the only one who assumed that this was the final boss during their first playthrough, so you can imagine my surprise when after defeating Exor he opened a portal revealing there was more game to be played. It's why Exor is my favorite boss in Super Mario RPG because whether it is his impact at the start of the game, the battle you have with him, or the twist reveal after defeating him, Exor just feels like a big deal. Another section I want to highlight that makes this ending great is the multi-door room towards the start of Bowser's Keep where you have to clear 4 of 6 rooms. These challenges can either be combat-focused, platforming-focused, or puzzle-based, and are some of the most fun rooms in the entire game. What I love is that you don't have to commit to anything if it frustrates you, so if you don't enjoy puzzles, you can stick to platforming or combat and vice versa. I enjoy having this choice, small as it may be, and think it's one of the standout areas of Super Mario RPG's finale. There are other positive qualities in Chapter 7 as well, like the cool tone and atmosphere of the weapon world that Exor serves as a gateway to, and the refights against the machine-made bosses inside the Smithy factory. However, while these fights, as well as the ultimate showdown with Smithy, are good if not great, Chapter 7 is a little lacking in personality compared to some of the other chapters. There are still charming moments like the chandelier ride up to fight Exor in Bowser's Keep, and Bowser's haiku in the Smithy factory that make me smile, but overall things feel a lot more streamlined and serious. In this scenario, I don't want to say that this is a bad thing, but I will say that I have a preference for the chapters with a little more dialogue and emphasis on story. That said, if combat is your favorite aspect of Super Mario RPG, then I totally understand if Chapter 7 is your favorite chapter, because there's tons of quality to be found here. I think it can be easy to forget just how much neat stuff is packed into Chapter 2 of Super Mario RPG because it all gets overshadowed by the game's most famous area, the Forest Maze. Admittedly, it's hard to deny that area's quality, but between the Karo Sewers, Tadpole Pond, and Rosetown, there's a lot of other stuff going on in this chapter that deserves praise before I get into why the Forest Maze is so great. From nearly running into Bowser and his army, to meeting Frog Fuchsius, to catching Link sleeping at the inn, there are a ton of great moments in this chapter. Which is why once again I want to compliment Super Mario RPG's pacing, because despite being significantly longer than Chapter 1, you'd hardly notice because there is so much to do. I really enjoy how each section adds a different element to the chapter as well. The Karo Sewers provide a nice change of scenery and throws a little more combat your way. The Midas River contains a fun minigame and beautiful visuals. The Tadpole Pond expands the story and plants the seeds for events that will take place in future chapters, and Rosetown adds intrigue to the chapter with its mysterious events while giving you a chance to rest as well. It all then culminates with the Forest Maze, which includes pieces of all of those elements along with a twist and a challenging boss battle. That said, the Forest Maze is truly notable for 2 main reasons, the first being its infectiously catchy music track, and the other for introducing one of gaming's most beloved characters in Geno. I think it speaks to the rarefied era that the Forest Maze is in that even if you've never played Super Mario RPG before, chances are you've likely listened to the Forest Maze theme if you are even just a cursory fan of video game music. Similarly, if you've had even a passing interest in the Super Smash Bros. Franchise at any point during the last 2 decades, you've probably at least heard of Geno, as he has been one of the most consistently requested characters and now even has a costume for your Mii to wear in Ultimate. Somehow this area's theme and main character managed to eclipse the popularity of Super Mario RPG itself, and that alone should tell you how great Chapter 2 of this game actually is. However, for as cool as Geno is, and for as much of an earworm as Beware the Forest Mushrooms is, it's all the little details that made me really fall in love with this chapter. Things like Mario getting salty when the little kid is whooping his doll with the Bowser doll, Mallow running through the forest telling himself he isn't going to cry, Frog Fuchsius pretending to float and getting angry at his Lakitu helper, Geno gaining consciousness and immediately giving himself a concussion on a table corner. All that on top of getting to use a triple move for the first time in the Bowyer fight, gaining a new partner, and several other small things that add up to something great. Chapter 2 of Super Mario RPG deserves its positive reputation for a reason, and it's a chapter I always look forward to on any replay. If you were to ask me what my favorite aspect of Super Mario RPG is, I'd probably have to go with its sense of humor. As fun as the combat is, and as enjoyable as the music is, the dialogue and personality of the characters in this game are what really stand out to me, and it's why I enjoy the events surrounding Booster Tower as much as I do. I think if I had to sum up Chapter 4 in a single word, I'd have to go with goofy, because this section of the game is absurd and ridiculous in the best possible way. This is the most unserious, lighthearted section in Super Mario RPG, and I don't think any other chapter makes me smile and laugh as much as Booster Tower does. It starts with the dumbfounded look Mario, Geno, and Mallow give Bowser for breaking down the door to Booster Tower, and it only gets sillier from there. You then have the team pretending to join Bowser's minions, Booster asking if Peach is showing her happiness by yelling "Mario, help me," Bowser gazing into the eyes of a Chain Chomp and telling Mario to look away, Booster pretending to walk down the aisle with a Sniffit, and Booster giving Mario his charm because he doesn't realize it's him. There are other little fun details in Booster Tower 2, like the first appearance of the 8-bit Mario gag we'd see in future Mario RPGs, that really nail home the absurdity that endears Chapter 4 to me. And if moments like Booster spitting a key out of his mouth for solving his portrait puzzle weren't funny enough already, it's hard not to be amused with the comically dramatic background music that's responsible for Booster Tower's goofy atmosphere. Later on in Mary Moore, things get even more ludicrous as we break into a church to stop Booster's wedding and finally acquire Peach as a party member. We also do battle with a cake, watch Booster drink Peach's tears, and of course watch as Mario gets a kiss from someone unexpected. My favorite aspect, however, is how everything just sort of abruptly ends in the middle of the boss fight as Booster eats the cake you were fighting and leaves once you've dealt enough damage to the monster. It gives me big Monty Python and the Holy Grail vibes, and I think it perfectly caps off the off-the-wall nature of the entire chapter. It seriously has an argument as one of the funniest sections in any Mario game, and I personally can't get enough of this kind of dumb humor. Now, if none of the things I've highlighted thus far amuse you, then Chapter 4 is probably not going to be one of your favorite sections in Super Mario RPG, but the main reason I've ranked this chapter as high as I have is because the area excels in the category that I value the most for Super Mario RPG. But that's not to say there aren't other positive qualities as well, because the previously mentioned cake boss, no, not that one, was the most challenging in the entire game. In fact, it was the only place I died in my most recent playthrough, and I appreciate the tough battle. We also get 2 partners in this chapter, and while we don't really get to use Peach, Bowser has plenty of time to shine, which is great because he is my favorite party member in Super Mario RPG. With that in mind, despite Chapter 4 having a lot going for it, it isn't without flaw, and I'm not really crazy about Booster Pass or Booster Hill. The Booster Hill minigame is a little fun, but goes on a bit too long for my taste, and is pretty obviously just a transition to get to the next town. Booster Pass, on the other hand, doesn't really add much of value to the game, and I always forget it exists because there isn't much of note to be found there. I don't think either of these 2 areas hurt Chapter 4 in a meaningful way, but I can honestly say that the game wouldn't lose anything without these 2 sections. Thankfully, they are short, allowing you to get to the good parts quickly, which there is no shortage of in Super Mario RPG's fantastic 4th chapter. Honestly, picking which chapter in Super Mario RPG was going to be ranked number 1 was a pretty easy decision, as I can't think of a more deserving pick than Chapter 6. Encompassing all the events from Belome Temple to the Barrel Volcano, this is by far the longest chapter with the most content in the game. That alone gives it an advantage over the other chapters we've discussed thus far, but it's not just the quantity of content that elevates this chapter to the number 1 rank, it's the quality as well. From the boss fights, to the music, to the story, everything is either the best or near the best that Super Mario RPG has to offer, and it's why I look forward to this section the most. Personally, Nimbus Land is my favorite area in the entire game, and I really enjoy the story arc involving Mallow and Valentina. There are so many silly moments, from Valentina trying to pass Dodo off as Prince Mallow, to Mario's Trojan horse-style invasion of Nimbus Castle, that I can't help but enjoy the ridiculousness of it all. We get to see Mario do some acting again, Birdo make her return as a boss fight for the first time since Super Mario Bros. 2, and then everything ends with Valentina and Dodo piecing out in the middle of battle after getting whooped too hard. It's overall a very funny and charming chapter, but having wholesome moments like when Mallow reunites with his parents show why it's really as endearing a chapter as it is. However, Nimbus Land is only one portion of Chapter 6, and while I thoroughly enjoy the story and combat found in Nimbus Castle, it's not the only noteworthy location worth discussing. The Barrel Volcano, while not terribly long, is also very enjoyable thanks to its twists and boss fights against the Tsar Dragon and the Axum Rangers. Something I really enjoy about the Switch remake of Super Mario RPG is how they've added cutscenes in before certain bosses, and the one at the start of the Tsar Dragon has to be the coolest and most badass of them all. The fight itself is also really memorable for the fake out that leads into Stage 2 against Zombone, the creature's undead form, not just because it subverts your expectations, but also because it sets up an even better fake out when the Axum Rangers arrive. I know that I was definitely not expecting there to be another boss fight after I got the 6th star, but to my pleasant surprise it wound up being the single most iconic fight in Super Mario RPG. While the battle itself is not terribly challenging, I can't think of a more impressive or cinematic fight than the one that we have with the Axum Rangers atop their Blade battleship. The backdrop of an active volcano really sells the grand scale of this fight and adds to the drama of knowing we'll only be one step away from completing our adventure if we can win this fight. It makes everything just that much more exciting, and the tone and atmosphere of this battle is what makes me love the Axum Rangers, even if I'm not all that crazy about the Power Rangers they're paying homage to. And I could say more about both the Barrel Volcano and Nimbus Land, but we've only touched on 2 of Chapter 6's numerous areas, and the other sections deserve some love too. It's worth mentioning that Monstro Town, Bean Valley, and Land's End all positively contribute to Chapter 6's greatness in some way, shape, or form. Fighting against Jinx the martial arts master, Culex the optional super boss, and taking on the 3 Musty Fears quest are all worth the time and effort and make Monstro Town worth visiting. Likewise, Bean Valley and Land's End contain plenty of secrets and solid fights that make them both quality areas that don't feel like padding that you're wasting your time in, as other areas can. Truthfully, Chapter 6 almost deserves its own video because there is too much good stuff, and I can't get to it all here, but needless to say, there's a reason I've given it the top spot on this ranking, and why it is my favorite chapter in the game. It's a shining example of why Super Mario RPG is beloved the way it is, and absolutely deserves any and all praise that comes its way. Super Mario RPG is one of the most approachable role-playing games ever made, and it really fills me with so much joy knowing how many more people have been introduced to it via the remake. With tons of memorable characters and hilarious moments, nearly every chapter brings something to the table that is worth experiencing, but I want to know what you think. Did you agree with my placements? If not, let me know how you'd rank them in the comments down below. Also, be sure to drop a suggestion for the next ranked video that you'd like to see, and as always, be sure to like the video and subscribe with notifications on to be alerted whenever I release a new video. Thanks for watching.